Who are the top targets at each position in Dynasty leagues? Find out next on Fantasy Baseball Today Express. Welcome into FBT Express on Saturday, February 8th. I am Frank Stanfield, joined by Scott White. Not every day that we give you Dynasty content, but we figured, bonus FBT Express, why not? Scott surveyed his social media followers and got answers to the top Dynasty targets at each position, Scott. So we will start with catcher. What did you find out at this position?
Top target is Adley Rutschman with 34% of the responses. Fourth straight year, Adley Rutschman has been the leading vote getter at catcher, which it kind of surprised me this time, though, because William Contreras has been the top performer at the position the last 2 years, was far ahead of Rutschman last year. And they're the same age. I don't know if there's this perception that William Contreras is older. They're both 27. So I would rather have Contreras, but for the fourth year in a row, Rutschman was the top choice.
All right, Scott, over to first base. This one, not as close.
Not as close. It was a runaway here. Vladimir Guerrero got 69% of the vote. I believe he was the top vote getter at any position. And that's been the norm since he entered the league. Last year was an exception, though. Last year, Matt Olson was coming off that huge year where he hit 54 homers, led the majors in RBI as well. Last year, Matt Olson was the leading Dynasty target with 25%. Vladimir Guerrero right behind him. But after Guerrero had that rebound season with hitting like 350 from May 1st on and putting himself back in the first round discussion for redraft leagues, he is clearly the first baseman everybody wants in Dynasty leagues.
Over to second base, this position feels a little bit more open. What did we find out at second base?
I was surprised by the results at second base because the top choice, with 26% of responses, Jackson Holliday. Now, Jackson Holliday is a good Dynasty target, no doubt. He was the top prospect in baseball at this time a year ago. But the rookie season was kind of a disaster. He got multiple chances with the big club and just got eaten alive by major league pitching, basically. So I thought maybe there would be kind of a cooling effect with his Dynasty value. Not that it would bottom out by any means. We're smarter than that. But to see him as the top choice at second base still, when, by the way, there's another consensus top 5 prospect in the discussion here, Christian Campbell. He was second to Westberg in the responses. Campbell hasn't burned me yet, so I might slightly prefer Campbell in a Dynasty league to Holliday. And I will say that my top choice isn't either one. My top choice in a Dynasty league at second base would still be Ozzie Albies, who kind of had a stranglehold on this position for a while. He's coming off a down year himself. And he's getting older, but he's 28. He's not that old yet. And he's a proven, consistent early round contributor in fantasy. So I think even ahead of the young up-and-comers, Holliday and Campbell, I would prefer Ozzie Albies. He was only the sixth leading vote getter this year at second base.
All right, over to third base. Scott, say it with me.
Caminero! Ha! Ha, Caminero! Yes, he got 40% of the vote, did Junior Caminero. Totally makes sense. Consensus top 5 prospect last year, hits the ball incredibly hard, has a very bright future. He was the top one. The next 3 were Jose Ramirez, Austin Riley, and Rafael Devers, who have kind of dominated this position, certainly from a Dynasty perspective, for the last several years. So it's nice to get some new blood in there with Caminero. Looking at my Dynasty rankings, I do have Jose Ramirez ahead just because he's like year after year, first round numbers, top 5 overall player, just such a super stud that's so hard to find ever. Maybe Caminero will be that someday, but it's hard to bet on any player being that someday, I understand Ramirez is 32 now, so you're only going to have so many more years of that, but just the extent of his contributions is so great that he might for me, inch out Junior Caminero, even in a dynasty context. Totally understand Caminero being number one, though.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be back right after this.
Yeah, we always find our way back home.
Welcome back in FBT Express. We are revealing the top dynasty targets at each position per Scott White's survey on social media. And over to shortstop, this one, I mean, there's so much talent at the position, but even that, not close.
Yeah, 68.9% for Bobby Witt, which totally makes sense. He's still at the start of his career, very young, and even in redraft leagues is in the number one overall discussion. So he's referring to those dynasty rankings I have, Bobby Witt's number one as the dynasty option for me, regardless of position. So it makes sense he'd be number one at shortstop. But yeah, Gunnar Henderson, Elly De La Cruz, they're both at this position too. They're both top 5 players in dynasty. They were only able to manage 12% for Henderson, 9% for De La Cruz of the responses, with Bobby Witt being such a standout.
Moving over to the outfield, much bigger player pool, obviously, at this position, Scott. So kind of feels like it might be a little open here. What do you got?
But Juan Soto got the most responses, 26%, and he is still very young, 26 years old, I believe. He's my second overall dynasty player behind Bobby Witt. So it makes sense that he got the most responses here. I thought the most interesting thing, though, Jackson Chourio was number 2, beating out Ronald Acuna, beating out Corbin Carroll, who would have been my top choice after Soto. Corbin Carroll, I believe I have 5th in my dynasty rankings. Meanwhile, Julio Rodriguez, who, of course, he was the second lead vote getter in outfield last year. Huge dynasty asset, obviously. Julio Rodriguez, still very early in his career. He only got 3.1% of the responses this year. And Fernando Tatis, who himself is only 26, he did not get, he only got 2 responses. He was not a significant enough percentage to be featured in the little graph in the article. So
wow.
That shows you just how much dynasty talent there is at outfield, that both Julio Rodriguez and Fernando Tatis could be afterthoughts.
All right, moving over to starting pitcher. Obviously, a little bit tough to gauge from a dynasty perspective because, there's so much volatility year over year with pitching. But this graph doesn't look very different from current redrafts. Who's number 1?
Paul Skenes is number 1. Totally makes sense. 57% of responses. Right behind him is Tarek Skubal. Well, not right behind him, but next on the list, number 2 is Tarek Skubal. He got 19% of the responses. I kind of think the gap should be bigger, though. Tarek Skubal, you may be surprised to learn, is already 28. He was a late bloomer, I guess you could say. And you don't want to put too much on age at starting pitcher because they tend to burn out early. I mean, who knows? Hopefully Paul Skenes is dominant for the next 10 years at least, but who knows? I mean, he might burn out and his youth is kind of wasted if that happens, but he does have the youth. He does have the dominant arsenal, and he is the clear number 1 for dynasty leagues right now.
Yep. And then over to relief pitcher, Scott, we know, again, like starting pitcher, but even more so much volatility year over year, who was first place at this position.
Yes, and year after year, it's always very different who the leading vote getter at relief pitcher is. But this year, it's Mason Miller. He got 36% of the responses. Emmanuel Clase got 26%. He was second, and Emmanuel Clase is consistently in the top 3 for this exercise. And I believe he is the same age as Mason Miller. So that would be my choice. Like, if there's one thing you want from a closer, it's consistency, and Emmanuel Clase delivers that. Mason Miller, as quickly as starting pitchers burn out, relief pitchers, closers especially, even quicker. You just can't count on longevity from him. Clase has been more the exception than the rule, but the people prefer Mason Miller.
Yeah, they are the same age. I would not have expected that. 26 years old for both Mason Miller and Emmanuel Clase. For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to our full-length podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today Express, and we will be back again next week. Bye-bye.